Welcome to an SFB Addict video.
Okay, so this is going to be a little talk through of a recording of an SFB module cadet game that we played. Rafello and myself played a little game here. We took a Klingon Cadet Destroyer up against a Federation Cadet Destroyer. And right here we're just talking about what rules we're going to use. We're actually using some rules that are beyond just the cadet game because the two of us know the fuller, larger set of rules of Starfleet battles. So to make it more interesting for the two of us, we started adding a few rules in. And in Cadet, Federation and the Plasma players always come in first turn of arming of their weapons. I'm taking the Klingon in this one, and I didn't want to have to sit through the Federation flying around the map, trying to open up the distance arming his weapons, so I'm just telling him to go ahead and assume he's armed on a second turn. That way we can get right into the game. So right here we are just allocating our forms for the ships. Now these destroyers use fractional movement. So it's a 1/2 scale, so movement of 5 would be speed 10. And I'm just deleting some lines for some rules that we're not using in the game. Now a lot of these cadet cruisers and cadet destroyers and cadet frigates haven't really been play tested for balance. They're just something that we threw together so that you'd have a little bit of variety in the cadet game. And when you start playing with the set of rules that are available, the balance changes radically. For instance, if you're using T-bombs, drones become much less of a threat than they were before. If you're using wild weasels, suddenly they have a major Achilles heel. And here I'm just taking a look at what I have for a loadout for my drones and considering swapping the positioning around a little bit in the racks. In the original Cadet booklet, you only have one type of drone, speed 8, explosion 6, hit points of 4. But for the sake of having some variety, I just threw together a bunch of drones like the C2, which is a slower drone but has a higher explosive warhead. C3, again, a faster drone. Even threw in a C6, which is a fairly fast drone, but it's got a phaser 3 instead of an explosive warhead. Now, normally in the cadet game, all drones are known exactly as to what type they are. And here, since we're using wild weasels, we're going to keep what the drones are in terms of what type they are hidden until they are identified using labs, or identified the hard way in terms of letting them hit you. Now in the cadet game, we're not using scatter packs. A scatter pack is a shuttle that has up to 6 drone spaces of drones attached to it. And you launch the shuttle, it travels a certain length of time and distance, and then it releases those drones all at once. Whereas the ship itself only has either only 1 drone rack or 2 or 3 drone racks, etc. And that's the only drones you can launch for that entire turn. So in the cadet game, it's without scatter packs, it's really hard to build up a wave of drones. Whereas in the full game of Starfleet Battle, scatter packs are common, and you're used to having cruisers with 4 drone racks. So building up drone waves is rather easy for Zenties. Now here we have the change label, which lets you label the counter. You can use it for just giving your ship a name, but we find it really useful for labeling it with the speed. And as you notice, it actually echoes that right into the chat window, so that helps knowing that when an impulse is called for speed X, Y, and Z to move, and the piece moves, whether or not that piece should be moving or not, because you can see the speed right there in the chat echo. And here I'm just reminding Ravello to label his little destroyer counter with his speed. Now there's several ways of calling the speeds in the Cadet module. We're choosing here to use the 16 impulse movement chart, which I've actually placed on the map. There's a couple of other ways, which you can see in my other videos. By having the graphical chart on the map, you and your opponent can see what's called upon to move the next several impulses, and some people prefer it that way. Now we're playing this game without a Skype connection, so it's only chat. So we're going to be using the buttons across the top where it says ready, halt, no action, and the various SOP steps. I'm moving speed 10, he's moving speed 12. And we're using a dual monitor setup here, so my player SSD area is on the next monitor over. I'm just dragging over the Klingon side slip turn mode, drone, shuttle markers that I'll need for later onto that SSD. I'm zooming the map out so I don't have to scroll the map up and down in order to see all the counters. So Starfleet Battles is basically a game of maneuvering your ship and then firing kind of thing. Sounds simple, but once you actually get into the mechanics of the rules, it can get a little bit complex and rather interesting and even challenging. You've got directional shielding, and you've got directional firing arcs on various positions on the ship, so you have to maneuver to get the weapon that you want to be able to fire on the shield facing of the enemy that you want it to fire upon, at the same time trying to keep the enemy from hitting your damaged or weak shields, etc. Now in the Cadet game, the turn modes and the speeds are rather short turn modes. It's usually 1 or a 2 for a turn mode, which makes the Cadet ships really maneuverable, where in the full game you would have 3, 4, 5, or 6 hexes that you'd have to go forward before you'd be able to turn again. But it's challenging enough as it is. After all, the Cadet ships is supposed to feed you into the full-scale game, etc. They're also pretty good ships if you just want to have a fast, quick little 1-hour game. Typically, a full-sized battle between 2 heavy cruisers, using the standard tournament rules, can take up to about 2 hours. Whereas a single duel with Cadet ships can take about an hour. Some people have asked why did I make the shuttle counters so large. Well, the simple fact is that most people are going to zoom out the map so that they can see a large section of the map all at once, and if you make your shuttles small in real proportion size to the ships, you can't see them. The same thing with the drones. So the Dreadnought, the Destroyer, and the Frigate, in terms of ships, are all going to be roughly the same size in terms of filling a hex so you can see them, as opposed to them being smaller in size in reality. Fictional reality. Again, we've actually gotten close enough here that we're going to start firing. I think at this point I realized that the Klingon Disruptor is not able to fire at range 0. And next impulse, I believe we both move, so there's a high probability that we're going to go from range 3 to range 0. And the photons, of course, have the same thing. They're not able to fire at range 0 and range 1. They can only fire at range 2. This is where the Cadet module is not as refined as the Starfleet Battles Online module, or client, I should say. This is a pre-built notes thing that we're using for delayed notes to do reveal fire simultaneous orders. And you literally have to open it a second time, go back in and highlight it to see something once it's been revealed. Whereas the Starfleet Battles Online client, once you open up a step, you enter your orders, it doesn't return until the opponent does the same thing on his end. And then once you both submit your orders, they're both immediately revealed to the chat area. So it's a much more refined client. This is a bit of a kludge. I'm not a programmer. I've put this together using the functions that are available for the module building as it is. If I knew Java code, I could probably create a specific Java class to implement something to do that in a better way, but I'm not a programmer, so we make do with what's here. So here the Federation wanted to fire both his photons and both his phaser ones, but one of his phaser ones is left side and one of them is right side. And here I am looking at my battery for reinforcement, and I know I'm going to use my battery for reinforcement, so I'm just filling in those lines. Now over here on the right is the cadet damage chart. I'm just waiting for him to roll. So 522. So that's a weapon, hull. Now the way that chart works is that once you run out of column A, for instance, let's say he did 4 rolls on a 1, and let's say there's only 3 hull. Well, that would be 3 hits on hull, and then the next hit would be an engine hit on column B. If all the engines were previously destroyed, it would then go to column C. And here I'm taking one of my weapon hits on a shuttle bay. I'm going to pull up the specific rule that says that you can do that. The cadet game uses a different damage allocation chart than the full game, and it gives you a lot more selection opportunities for what you want to take for damage. And it's D4.324 that lets you take a shuttle box hit instead of a weapon hit. Now, if the shuttle was in that bay, the shuttle would get destroyed with the bay. Here I am, I'm looking at the various types of drones I have available, looking at their speeds, etc., and I'm deciding what I'm going to launch as my 3 drone launches. For the Cadet game, it's a little different than the full game. In the full game, you have very strict percentages on what type of special drones you can have, but you've also got your top rack and then a complete reload rack available. In the Cadet game, you've only got just the 4 drones that are in the rack, period. There's no additional reloads. So when it came to doing the percentages, I decided to let the drones be rather interesting, so they're not as restricted as they are in the full game. Now, I don't know where the fit is going to maneuver next impulse, so I'm launching the drones in various directions here to take that into account. Because the first movement of a drone must be directly forward, or it stays in its spot and uses its movement to do an HET, and it just rotates and doesn't actually move out of the hex. Here I made a mistake. I just said C6. I should have also put in that it would be firing immediately, or that it would be firing when it got to such and such a range, or such and such an impulse. The way I wrote it, the default should be an assumption that it fires immediately. When I pull up my fire orders here in a second, you'll see that I forgot to write in that the drone was firing, so I couldn't go back and say it should have fired along with it for more damage. I suppose I could have argued for that, but being a teaching game, I made the mistake, so at that point I put in that it would fire once it reached such a range and such an impulse. This is the units on map window, and when you get counters all stacked up in the same hex, it's easier to do things, move them, etc. using the units on map than it is to double click on the hex and then try and select the 1 unit out of 7 that you want to get a hold of. As you can see, the firing orders, or the notes here, can pile up rather quickly, and each note has to have a unique name. That's why I put in turn, impulse, and then the stage. If I just simply put in fire stage, next time I open it, I can't use fire stage as the order. So it's got to be a unique label, so putting in the turn impulse helps. As you saw here, I forgot to write in that the drone was firing. So the disruptor, my phaser 1, should say drone, but I forgot to do that, so live with your mistakes. Here I just clued in that I failed to put in the firing order for the drone. By launching my drones in those two directions here, it pretty much forces the Fed to either allow one drone to hit him or he turns away. I just clued in that one of my drones is slower than the other two, and I accidentally moved it. Here I rotated the drone so I could identify it, so I could drag it backwards. Here the drone, for its movement, it must either get closer or maintain the target inside of its FA arc, and since going forward would take it to range 3 without putting the target in its FA arc, it has to HET and therefore not move out of its current hex, in order to bring the target into its FA arc. Now that's a speed 16 drone. It will move on the first impulse if he doesn't kill it this impulse. So that means he's going to have to either move speed 16 or successfully kill the drone. Now I know that the drone won't be killed with a simple phaser 3 shot. He had early messed up on his fire orders with his left side phaser 1, so I'm reminding him that that left side phaser 1 is still available, that it didn't fire, because in his mind he may have still be thinking that he actually did fire it. So in his first battle pass he fired his 2 photons, his right side phaser 1 and his right side phaser 3 at me, which leaves his left side phaser 1 and left side phaser 3 available. Now here a phaser 1 and a phaser 3 for that drone is a bit of an overkill. So what he should be doing is he should be down firing his phaser 1 as a phaser 3 in addition to firing his phaser 3. So that's 2 phaser 3s at the drone, which would be an automatic kill. And he would have half a point left over unfired in his phaser capacitor, which would be there next turn for his one and only remaining phaser 3. So he would only have to arm his 2 phaser 1s. Now normally I wouldn't tell him that he had to generally reinforce or go speed 16, but at this point he's lost 3 of his 6 shields. I think I've only got 1 down shield. The angle that the Fed approached on was kind of bad. He kind of wanted to be able to fire and then turn away instead of having to sort of sidestep towards me, then fire, then turn. And he might have wanted to have accepted a slightly worse statistical shot at range maybe 4. Now he does still have 10 power, but he doesn't really have enough power to arm anything if he goes speed 16. He could arm 2 of his phasers but not his photons. And if he tries to arm his photons, that's going to take 4 power, which leaves him not going speed 16. So at this point, the Fed needs to basically disengage to avoid taking more damage. And that's pretty much it for this first walkthrough of the game. Hope you enjoyed it.